and it's hard. It's hard to get people to see past what they've lived their whole life with.
Dan, how did you find keto?
Um, well, it was in the fall of 2020. I was reaching my maximum weight. I just was finally decided that I didn't want to buy another bigger set of clothes. My brother had actually had some success on Atkins, um, and so I was kind of looking into the whole low carb, and I'd seen that it kind of had morphed from the Atkins more into the keto, the very low carb uh, lifestyle, and so really through internet research and things like that, I found what it was about, um, what kind of levels of carb intake you're looking for, and then I tried to find how could I figure out to make it work in my life and what I was doing and what I was willing to do. The reality is, in many worlds, keto is 5% carbs. I didn't want to quite restrict myself that much. So, maybe a keto light, maybe about 10% carbs. But the weight came off and I was feeling a lot better, and it really worked for me up until COVID.
So, when you say max weight, what was your max weight?
375 pounds. Yeah. So I'd really gotten up there.
Yeah.
So
And being on keto, how did that help you with your weight? What did you get down to?
and the first time before keto, I was able to drop about 50 pounds. In the 5 months I was able to do it. Um, I was able to establish some routines at work, bringing food from home, staying out of the vending machines at work and things like that. And, yeah, it was really establishing a routine. Unfortunately, COVID shut down the job I was working at. So I got fired, was back home, was sitting around a lot, fell back into some old habits. Slowly, the weight started coming back on, as the stories go. You're on that low carb. It works really well. You go back to old styles of eating, and of course, the weight comes back because that's the way that style of eating, at least for me, led to. So that went on until 2 August ago. So August of 22. I was at 370, basically right back where I'd begun. And I was like, well, shirts aren't fitting again. And again, I'm not willing to go up in size. And I was in a new job. And so I was able in a position where, right, if I could reestablish some of those routines that had worked before, I felt like I could do it again. So I started doing it. My wife, she's not in on keto, but she was definitely willing to support me and make sure that the meals that we were having at home were low carb and things like that. So even though she's not dedicated to the low carb eating, she was more than happy to eat low carb meals for dinners and things like that. And of course, having that support has made a huge difference. So this time through, I'm still on it. So 17 months in, I'm down 127 pounds.
That's awesome. 127 pounds. So you're around 250 at the moment.
Just 243. So yeah, just a little under that.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm at my minimum weight loss was 120. So I've slowed down a little bit lately here, but it's still coming off. So keeping at it. I'm not giving it up because I want to keep going. It's not as much of a push, but I feel good. I don't want to give up uh, all the things that it has changed in my life. So,
So, I mean, 127 pounds is a massive amount of weight loss. Like, what has changed for you because of that weight loss?
in other health regards, I mean, just the energy. I had pretty severe sleep apnea that has improved significantly. I had acid reflux, um, constipation, you know, just brain fog. Everything revolved around food, eating all the time. So like your day was like, okay, get up, eat something. Now I got 3 hours of work to get through before I can get to my first break and have a snack and eat something. And that's just not true. Like now I have incorporated intermittent fasting. So now I eat in the evening. Well, I eat from lunch until the evening. And then after dinner until lunch the next day, I'm not eating and it doesn't bother me. And, sometimes lunch gets pushed back a little later and it just doesn't matter, right? I mean, a couple hours, I'm still not hungry. Unfortunately, I still kind of have to eat by a clock because that's when I get a lunch break. And if I miss that, then by the time it's dinner time before I can eat, that's a little long for me. But, um, so my life doesn't revolve around food because I'm sleeping better. I'm not napping during the day. I mean, just all around, feel better, life's better, more energy. I can do work around the house. I can play with my kids more. Um, you know, I could go on and on about it, but
Mm.
just in so many regards.
That's awesome. And so, what kind of work do you do? Is it a physical job or is it pretty much sedentary?
I would say it falls in the middle. I'm an instructor in aviation maintenance, so there's time where I'm just in the classroom with the students, but we also go out in the shop working on aircraft and learning the skills to maintain aircraft. So it's not a rigorous physical job, but I'm also not sitting at a desk all day long. So
And I imagine even when you're in the classroom, you'd need some of that energy to be able to kind of keep your students engaged, right?
yeah. Oh, and the mental fog, before keto. I mean, just they're as much as we try to prepare for questions that students are going to have, they always come up with new ones, and being able to think on your feet and get the answers that they're looking for to help them learn. If you got that mental fog going on, it's a tough challenge every day, and you know, we all have struggles, but it's definitely reduced now that I'm not hungry all the time. The energy levels at a much better place than it was before.
So your eating window is basically lunch to dinner.
Yep.
Can you give me an example of the kind of stuff that you're eating? Like you said, your wife is not doing this with you, but she's happy to prepare um, something that's keto friendly.
Uh,
So, what kind of dinner would you be having?
like tonight we're gonna have burgers, so I'll have burgers without a bun. Basically just eat the patties, and we'll have a side of veggies, things like that. So, keeping it to low carb veggies, so no potatoes or anything like that. So broccolis, cauliflowers, zucchini, things like that. A lot of times I'll bring leftovers then in for the next day for lunch, and eat that. So start with a lot of meat, a little bit of veggie at lunch. Usually carries me into the evening. Might have a little cheese snack after work, before dinner time. Then we'll again steaks, burgers, chickens, rotisserie chicken, and just eat the skin and the meat without much else, and a little bit of veggies. Really get rid of the potatoes and the pastas and the rices. Use a lot of cauliflower rice as a substitution, and you know don't really miss the rice. So yeah, it's worked.
Nice. Yeah, I can't say I've missed the rice in over the last year and a half either. So, um, so how have people around you reacted to the way you're eating?
Um, they haven't really reacted to the way I'm eating as much as the weight loss. So obviously that's the thing that everyone sees. They're thrilled with the weight loss, and obviously being at 370 pounds, my health wasn't very good. I had metabolic syndrome, and things like that. And so the weight loss, the energy, they see how much more energetic I am. Those are the big things. Unfortunately, outside of my wife and our family, it's been hard to kind of get that message across to them about this is a way that you can eat and it's okay and it works. So yeah,
So is it kind of, oh, you're looking good. What are you doing? Oh, I could never do that.
yeah, yeah. I get a lot of that. So oh, I love carbs. I could never give them up. Well, that's because that's what you're used to. It's what you're addicted to. You don't want to give it up. Not that you can't give it up because you do it, you try it. Yeah, those first couple of weeks we know it can be tough, but once you get over that hump, it really gets really easy and it's much better over the long run. So,
So you mentioned metabolic syndrome. Like, were you on any meds before that you've been able to give up? Were you
uh,
a diabetic or anything?
I was in the early stages of pre-diabetes. I wasn't on any medication yet for that, but I did have high blood pressure. So I was on a combination of medications for that, which I've now gotten completely off all medications for my high blood pressure. And I actually recently went in for my yearly physical and got my blood work done. My A1C went from 5.7 down to 5.0. My fasting glucose was 90 or 91. And yeah, everything looked great. My HDL was up by about 15 points. My LDL was elevated slightly, but still okay. And my triglycerides were down by about 40 points. So
That's awesome. So the doctor must have been pretty happy with all those results.
yeah, I was a little concerned that he was going to put me on statins or encourage me for statins with the LDL, but he looked at it and he said, with your A1C and your triglyceride and HDL ratio, he's like, I think you're doing great, and the LDL was slightly elevated, but not enough to say, get on statins, which I'm not sure I would have gone for, at least at this time.
Almost, it feels like a constant fight when you are speaking to doctors, and it's like my LDL's high, so they're going to be offering it, and 90% of the time they will be.
Yeah. So
Mm.
been considering, and I've had the conversation with him in the past, so I know he's not into keto. Unfortunately, where I live, there's not a lot of doctors that prescribe the keto lifestyle, and so I've kind of had to go on my own and kind of fight him a little bit on that, and kind of stand my ground because I believe what I'm doing is right and it's working for me, and I'm feeling great. And
So how are you now with things like cravings? Like if you've got someone in your class who's kind of got I don't know, a soda or a donut or something like that, how do you feel kind of watching someone eating something like that in front of you?
it luckily I've been strong enough to handle that. It doesn't really get to me because I don't have the hunger. I think that's a big part of those cravings. Seeing someone else eat that stuff is you're like, oh, I want that because I got a little pain, I got a little rumble in the gut that maybe that would fill for me. But since I don't got that, it just doesn't matter. It's like, okay, you have it, and I know where it leads because one, I've done this twice, right? I did it back in 2020. I got off it. The weight came back, so I know what it's like to bounce back and forth. Not just in past diets, but with keto and the fact that it works and the hunger's gone, and so it's been good. I really don't have a lot of those cravings. But I also try not to expose myself as much as possible. So,
Yeah, I kind of we're on a very similar timeline. So like we're about a month and a half or something difference in how long we've been doing this.
okay.
And Yesterday, I had this kind of situation where I was fasting for some tests I was having done, and I hadn't eaten for more than 24 hours, and I was in a convenience store just getting some water, and my stomach was a bit rumbly, and I'm walking past like the ice cream case and all this kind of thing, and kind of the packaged donuts and the on
Uh,
one side, the ice cream on the other side, and I'm like looking at it, and I was kind of feeling a little more tempted than I would usually be, simply because I hadn't eaten.
uh,
But um, uh, I did also have the same. I had like this conflicting feeling. One was, oh, you could just go one of those things because you're hungry. But then this other voice was there saying, yeah, but it's not going to do anything for you.
hmm
There's nothing in there that's going to help you. And it was kind of this very balanced feeling about it, like, oh yeah, oh no.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I actually quit smoking about 8 years ago, and it's the same feeling, right? You quit smoking, you finally give this up, you start feeling better, and then you're out at a bar or out with friends and they're smoking, and you're like, oh, it's been a year or 2 years since I've had one, and maybe I can just have one. And it's like, no, because one, it does you no good, and two, why? What's the point of going back to something that does no good for you and just makes you feel worse, and things like that? I feel like it has a lot of that same uh, sensibility and thought process when you're dealing with it.
Yeah, and the smoking is very much like the carbs, right? So it's
Mhm.
like for that few seconds when you're smoking or you're ingesting those carbs, it's like, oh, this feels great, and then like it's immediately you feel bad.
Yeah. It, it also, I also get the reminder from my wife because, once in a while she gives into the cravings and pigs out on a lot of carbs, and because she's not keto, but she's definitely in a low carb situation, and she goes, "Oh, I can really feel lethargic today because of all the carbs I had yesterday for lunch or dinner or whatever." And it's like, yep, that reminds me, like, yeah, I don't want to be back there.
Yeah, so you did okay during Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I did sneak a very small a slice of pie, but overall, I did avoid all the sweet potato and all that. And when they came around to ask me for pie, I said, "Give me the smallest piece of pie you can cut." And they gave me just this little tiny sliver. They're like, "Is that too small?" I'm like, "Nope." Like, that's that's what I meant. Actually, it was maybe even a little bigger than I wanted. Like, I wanted just a little taste, but I mean, overall, considering the gluttony that happens at Thanksgiving, I very much contained what I had. But um, it, w- there is room to have an occasional thing. Just how often does that occasion happen? Once a year is one thing. So
It's great. It's great when you're at the point where you can get through the holidays, right?
yeah.
So whether it's Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, well, and last year was my first year through Thanksgiving and Christmas. So last year, like, it was a struggle, but I also pushed myself to ensure that I wasn't going to dive into the cookies and the pies and stuff like that. And yeah, now that I got a year and a half under my belt, or coming up on a year and a half, I'm having that one little bit isn't enough to send me back into eating carbs all the time. So.
Nice. And so, for you, is this the lifestyle going forward? Like, you can't ever see yourself going back to a regular diet now?
I do not. And actually, as of late, I've been seeing more about carnivore and stuff like that. Now, I enjoy vegetables, or so I'm not convinced about giving them up, but it intrigues me. I believe you've talked about the 90-day carnivore challenge. Like, just try it. All right, what's going to happen? You try it for 90 days. If you like it, great. If you don't, you go back to what you're doing, and it's not going to hurt you, at least. So I've actually considered making that next step into carnivore. I haven't done it yet, but no, I have no intention of going back. It's working. I was just talking to a coworker today, and they were like, "Oh, how'd you do it?" And I did say keto, and they're like, "How long are you doing it?" I'm like, "Hopefully forever," because I feel great. Everyone thinks I'm look great, and and I'm happy, and at this point, like I've said before, I don't miss it. You know, so
So if one of your colleagues or a friend said to you, "Look, okay, I realize it's going to be hard, but I want to give this a go," how would you recommend they get started?
I think the big thing is finding what works for you, right? I mean, I've never been one to say that everyone has to be the same. Everyone has to eat carnivore. Everyone has to eat keto, right? You got to find what works for you. Like I said, back when I started at 10% carbs. I just felt like 5% was too restrictive. It didn't allow me to eat the vegetables and have a little bit of variety in my diet that I wanted at that time. But I knew going from 50, 60% carbs down to 10% was going to be a huge improvement. And even if you're up there and you're like, hey, I don't know if I want to go full keto or carnivore, fine, cut it down to half of what you're doing now, right? Find a stepping stone. And I think for the most part, you're probably going to feel better. You're going to have less hunger pains, and then you're going to see, hey, maybe I can make that next step just like I did, right? I went from keto, eating 3 meals a day with a couple snacks, and now I'm down to an intermittent fasting where I really only eat from lunch through dinner. So each step along the way, I've kind of stepped up a little bit further, being like, hey, this works, and maybe I can take that next step. And I think everyone can try that, right?
So, Dan, do you have an Instagram or a YouTube or anything if people want to reach out to you?
I do not. This is actually my first venture into social media in any form. So
No worries. Well, if you start up a YouTube or anything in the future, please let me know and I'll link to it.
yeah,
Um, but look, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us. Thank you so much.
yeah, you're welcome. Hopefully, you get some good stuff out of it, and other people do as well. Because I've tried to share the story, and it's hard. It's hard to get people to see past what they've lived their whole life with, which is flour and breads and sugars and all that stuff. So if it helps someone out there, I'm glad to do it.